morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all at this time for the second day of Pre-Presidency Conference. We have two more sessions planned for today. The first one is the plenary on differentiate integration and the future of Europe. Then afterwards, there are two parallel sessions that I hope you will choose one and join. Let us start with the video presentation from Vice President of the European Commission for Democracy and Demography, Ms. Dubravka Šuic. Ms. Dubravka Šuic was planning to join us, but at the last minute she had to go for another meeting to Strasbourg, but kindly enough her staff and herself prepared a video address to the PPC. So I'll ask the organizers to run the video recording.
Dear ministers, dear MEPs, my colleague commissioners, dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you especially to MEP Milan Brglec for your invitation to speak to you today. Together, resilient Europe. As Vice President of European Commission responsible for democracy and demography, I feel like the logo of the Slovenian Presidency is talking about my portfolio. In our work on democracy, the Conference on the Future of Europe is a process to bring all Europeans together, giving a voice to the hopes and dreams of European citizens for the European Union they want to live and work in. Bringing citizens into the heart of European Union policymaking reinforces our democracy, making it resilient in the face of many challenges. This helps bring Europe closer to the citizens. In addition, my work on demography addresses the challenges and opportunities of aging. This is the key demographic trend in the European Union. It is vital that we prepare our society now. Intergenerational solidarity is one of the points we address as we work together on the Green Paper on Aging. Indeed, solidarity is one of key lessons of the pandemic. Children are not only our future, but also agents of change in our present. This year, we adopted the first ever European Union Comprehensive Strategy on the Rights of the Child. It defines the Commission's and the Member States' work plan on children's rights for the coming years. The overarching objective is to improve child rights across the Union and globally through concrete actions from strengthening child participation to fighting child poverty, violence against children, supporting and protecting them as we undergo the digital and green transitions. Together, we are also building a long-term vision for rural areas. We did not write this vision alone in Brussels. We consulted widely to enable the voice of rural areas to shape this forward-looking, innovative proposal. My sincere thanks to the Slovenian Presidency for making the Conference on the Future of Europe one of your priorities. The conference is unprecedented at the European Union level. We look to a new horizon, one where it is not only politicians shaping the future of the European Union. Citizens are not an object of democracy. Citizens are participants. We are structurally embedding citizen engagement in the European Union. I welcome Slovenia's proactive attitude and open letter, Let's Discuss Europe, written by President Pahor and President Mattarella. Citizens' calls for greater participation in their democracy outside of elections is what drives this unique exercise in deliberative democracy. The conference is conceived for citizens, so they can deliberate amongst themselves and on a par with their elected representatives at the local, regional, national, and European levels. I cannot overstate the importance of Slovenia's role in the conference. The majority of citizens' engagement activities take place during your presidency, including European citizens' panels and plenary sessions. We count on your support to raise awareness of all the entry points for citizens, namely 3 Ps: the platform, the panels, and the plenaries. The conference Innovative Multilingual Digital Platform is the central hub for gathering contributions from all local, regional, and national events. A citizen in Slovenia can deliberate with a citizen in Sweden. European citizens' panels and plenaries will also feature here. A specialized feedback mechanism will analyze key points raised on the platform to be taken into account during the European citizens' panels and conference plenaries. There are 9 key topics for debate and deliberation, ranging from climate change to culture. We created an open box for citizens to engage on other topics, and I'm curious to find out what ideas citizens will discuss. The European citizen panels, composed of randomly selected citizens, will start in September, a key moment in the deliberative process. Each of the 4 European citizens panels is comprised of 200 citizens with at least 1 female and 1 male citizens per member state. I encourage member states to organize similar panels at national, regional, and local levels and to report back on the platform. These events will help ensure that the conference goes far beyond capital cities and reaches every corner of our union. Urban and rural. The outcomes of European citizens' panels will feed into plenaries. Citizens participate in plenaries on an equal footing with national parliaments and the European Parliament. The Commission has an open position as regards treaty change. Let us wait and see what citizens propose. Whatever they propose, all 3 institutions have committed to following up on the conference conclusions at the end of spring next year. I intend to see this through. The Commission is open to the participation of the Western Balkans in the conference. We are looking at ways how to facilitate this. Europe's ability to build strong partnership with our closest neighbors starts with the Western Balkans. The European Union provides significant support to this region. In May, my colleague Commissioner Varhelyi visited the region to deliver 651,000 BioNTech Pfizer vaccines. Last October, the Commission put forward an economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans to deliver investments of 30 billion euros in the areas of infrastructure, energy, and green and digital transition to create sustainable growth and jobs. By the end of this month, we will hold the first intergovernmental conferences with Albania and North Macedonia. We will hold intergovernmental conferences on 22nd of June with Montenegro and Serbia on the next steps in the accession negotiations. I welcome the collaboration of the Slovenian Presidency in our work on demographic change. This really has important consequences for our society and economy. The Commission's report on the impact of demographic change of June 2020 showed that in the last 50 years, life expectancy at birth has increased by about 10 years for men and women. Today, 20% of the population is above 65. By 2070, it will be 30%. The Commission adopted its Green Paper on Aging on the 27th of January, and the Slovenian Presidency is planning a follow-up to the Green Paper, including through a high-level conference on quality work for life quality and Council conclusions. The Commission welcomes your ambition. I also thank you for making children's rights one of the priorities of the Slovenian Presidency and to have committed to the adoption of Council conclusions this autumn on the strategy on the rights of the child. At the end of this month, we will adopt our long-term vision for rural areas, and I count on the Slovenian Presidency for the launch of its implementation. Rural areas cover 137 million people, representing 30% of European Union's population and over 80% of Europeans' territory. We invested a lot of time and energy in building this vision, not just for the rural areas, but with them. No 2 rural areas are alike, so we must harness their diversity. And this requires tailor-made responses and solutions for each territory's specific needs. The vision is all about addressing our common challenges together by building jointly on the emerging opportunities of the European Union's green and digital transitions and on the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. It will help us to identify the means to improve rural quality of life, achieve balanced territorial development, and stimulate economic growth in rural areas. The long-term vision bridges gaps and builds synergies between all European policies to create a new momentum for rural areas by using all the resources available to support the social and economic development of rural areas and make them vibrant, dynamic, and attractive. I am confident that this vision and its strong action plan will equip us with the necessary tools to encourage these regions to become confident, innovative, and competitive today and in the future. Dear ladies and gentlemen, together we can do so much that would quite simply not be possible by any member states alone. Together we make our democracy fit for the future by embedding citizen engagement in the European Union. Even Chile in South America is looking to our conference as inspiration for managing their constitutional process. The conference is not a panacea for all else, but taking the engagement of citizens to the next level and following up on their input is a good place to start together. As our union ages, there are many challenges and opportunities to face together to make our society and economy more resilient. Together, we make sure no one is left behind and that our rural areas are an option for those who want to live, work, and innovate there. I look forward to building our resilient Europe together with the Slovenian Presidency. Thank you.
I wish to thank on behalf of the organizers to the Commissioner Šuica for her words, especially stressing the togetherness, which I think fits very nicely into the discussion on differentiated integration. And let me mention just one small thing regarding the conference of the future of Europe. The PPC announcement, as well as the PPC reports, are featured on the platform of the conference. The reports will be published both in English and in Slovene. So we will be part already with the PPC of the discussions on the future of Europe. With this, we move on to the plenary session, which will be moderated by Professor Dr. Michael Kaeding, and I will be reading all of his titles so that I don't make any of the mistakes. Michael is IPC Mercator Fellow, Jean Monnet Professor at Personam at University of Duisburg Essen, and a visiting professor at College of Europe Bruges. And he is also a valued member of TEPSA. Michael, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Well, thank you very, very much for this very warm welcome, Maya. I'm very happy to be here, and I feel very honored to be in the position to moderate today's panel. Just for the information, before I welcome all of you, I just put actually in the chat the name of the panel, so just to make sure that you are actually at the right panel. But as you know, this is not a parallel session, so if you want to participate in the PPC, that's the right place to be. The right place to discuss actually the future of Europe, and here specifically and in particular the concept of differentiated integration and the future of Europe, a panel organized in the framework on the InDev project, InDev being one of the 3+1 Horizon 2020 projects on differentiated integration right now. The organizers of this PPC have come up with an excellent idea. We have a panel today composed of representatives of key researchers of all 3+1 Horizon 2020 projects. So we have Sandra Kröger, Matteo Bonomi, and Magdalena Góra. All three of them, I will introduce them shortly, one after the other, according to the program and the way they will give their short presentation. Let me start with Sandra. Sandra Kröger, she is actually beginning our panel. We will give her in a minute 10 minutes for her presentation. Dr. Sandra Kröger is senior lecturer at the University of Exeter in the UK. She has published widely on democracy in the European Union, differentiated integration in the European Union and Brexit. And Dr. Kröger is chair of the ECPR research network on DI, actually one of the results of these projects already, very active here. So she set up a new ECPR research network, which she shares on differentiated integration, and the incoming director, she is the incoming director of the Center for European Government at Exeter. I'm very happy, Sandra, that you are with us today. You said that you wanted to share a PowerPoint slide. So I will give you the floor, and while giving you the floor, I will also drop a short statement which you shared with me beforehand and which I will share now with all of you, so that you know which way Sandra will take in her presentation. Sandra, I'm very happy to have you on board. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael, and for this very warm introduction. Good morning, everybody. Actually from Cornwall, whilst what you see behind me there is some piece of Devon coast, but I'm still currently on holiday in Cornwall up until later today. Having said that, I will begin to share my slides. So I hope I will be forgiven to not focus on governments as we were invited to do, because that isn't really the focus of my work. So instead, I'll be focusing on public opinion as well as on party actors, and the latter have very much been the focus of my own research as regards DI, whereas as regards the public, I will be drawing on research done by others. So what do the public and party actors think of differentiated integration? Before I start sharing the results, I thought it would be helpful to just quickly remind us of the main benefits as well as risks as discussed in the main parts of the literature on DI. And as regards the benefits, on the one hand, there are a number of scholars who focus on basically what could be summarized as the efficient functioning of the EU. So DI allows the EU to overcome collective action problems. You know, it works as a pragmatic compromise. It can also actually work as a pusher towards more integration, with some going ahead and others going ahead later if you want. It can also provide for more efficient policy solutions than would otherwise be the case. So all of kind of improves the efficient functioning of the EU. But there are also some normative reasons that have been elaborated in the literature, which refer more to DI allowing to respect national diversity between the member states and the increasing heterogeneity of different types, namely social, economic, political, cultural, as well as also possibly being a fair instrument of integration by allowing those who don't quite have the economic capacity in particular to stay behind for some time until they do reach that capacity when they're ready to compete with others. So these are, broadly speaking, the arguments that come up in the literature so far as benefits are concerned. When we move to the risks, there are also quite a few that have been listed. And again, I'm just quickly rushing through these here because of the limited time available. So one could actually also say that DI exacerbates collective action problem because it makes it more difficult to, for the entirety of the EU, the 27 member states, to find compromises for overarching problems when some of their member states only participate in some of the policies. One can also say that it actually creates centrifugal dynamics by putting states on different paths of policy and institutional development, only ever making greater the gap that originally caused DI by setting them in different types of groups. Obviously, it also creates legal fragmentation, and as a result can create different types of rights and citizenship, something that particularly states and citizens from the East have been concerned about, that they might end up as second-class citizens somehow. It can also give rise to domination, whereby which obviously member states lose the right to vote in the council, and thereby can be affected by decisions to which they had no contribution in making. It can further raise issues of fairness, so the opposite of the benefit side of DI, by imposing negative externalities on those states that aren't participating in a specific policy for a reason or another, and yet are under the influence, think the euro, as well as encourage free riding. So there are all these possible risks as well, some of which might accumulate in increasing divisions between member states, which can be of a harder or softer nature. They can also, develop at a discursive level, which ultimately lead to an undermining of mutual trust, and potentially then can lead all the way to withdrawal, as we've seen with the UK. So there are quite a few potential risks as regards DI. Now, moving on, I won't be able to look at all of these benefits and risks as regards empirical findings, but I'll be looking at some of them anyway. Moving on to public opinion and DI. This draws on research done by these three colleagues here mentioned in this publication, which draw on Eurobarometer data, particularly from 2016. So it's not exactly from last year, but it's still quite recent. And so the general findings that they have come up with is that there are differences between the political right and the kind of center and center left, or left as regards DI, the political right being considerably more supportive of it, because it sees it as a mechanism really that supports economic liberalism, whereas those on the center and particularly on the left see it as undermining equality and justice between member states and citizens. So that's one big point that they find in the analysis of the data. Another point they find is that there are large regional gaps between citizens' appreciation between the North and Eastern European citizens on the one hand, and Southern European citizens on the other. And it's in the southern countries, and specifically Greece, Spain, and Portugal, which are by far the most skeptic countries, that citizens are much more skeptical of DI than in the North, and up to 30 points indeed. And this is actually a fairly new development. They also look at earlier data and show that before 2008, before the economic crisis hit, these countries, the citizens in these countries were actually more supportive than those in the North. So it's entirely swapped and changed since the crisis, and indicating that it's perceived as enhancing economic liberalism. Now, moving on to party views on DI, and as I said, this is more where my own research has been. This draws on qualitative data, and it's come out already with one publication. Two others are currently on their way. So this draws on 35 qualitative interviews with party actors in 7 member states, both at the domestic level and at the in the EP. So it's not generalizable data, but it does give quite good insights into how party actors reason about DI. And so what we found is that respondents were actually quite evenly split between supporters and opponents, which does show the divisive character of DI. And like the colleagues that I just referred to for the public support for DI, we also found that national background was very much a driver of how appreciative these party actors were, with wealth and the experience of DI really mattering the most. So those who were from wealthier member states, as well as with no experience, so basically northwestern countries, member states, they were much more favorable to DI than those from the east and from the south. That was a continued pattern. Also, the macro regions matter is what we also found, whereas partisanship, so traditional ideological divisions between the left and the right, seem to matter much less, even though there was also a little bit of an inclination of more leftist actors to be more critical, but it wasn't a strong trend by any means. As regards support for DI, the party actors mostly mentioned that DI is necessary, that integration can precede it all. So this idea of it helping to overcome collective action problems was often mentioned. As regards normative support, its ability to protect national diversity came off repeatedly. Also, the idea that I mentioned in regard to it allowing for fairness by allowing those who don't have the capacity yet to take their time and move ahead later was also mentioned by some actors. However, overall, support was mostly conditional and rather cautious. So even those who were overall favorable still also mentioned a number of critical points of DI. There wasn't really a strong endorsement of DI, even by these supportive actors. As regards the reasons for rejecting or for being critical to DI, other actors then said that it could actually be inefficient and end up weakening EU action. The normative concerns related to 3 issues or 4 issues mostly, namely its effect on solidarity, political equality, the EU's unity, and the rule of law. And I have listed the reasons why these 3, solidarity, political equality, and unity of law, how these were related to DI. I'm not going to go into them here, but you do have them on the slides, and of course can go back since this is being recorded. I want to, however, take the remaining time to look into the last point, namely that many of these party actors, without us having mentioned this at all, brought up the concern about DI being used as a way to undermine the rule of law. And I'm sure you all know who I have in mind. So this is going to be the last part of this presentation. And again, it starts with public opinion, which has shown in a poll that was published last October and was commissioned by DEP, that actually people in Hungary and Poland, citizens in Hungary and Poland, overwhelmingly support the rule of law conditionality, with over 72% in Poland and 74% in Hungary agreeing with linking the disbursement of EU funds to rule of law and democratic principles. Overall, a full 77% of all those that were polled agreed with this conditionality mechanism that eventually was introduced, even though in a weaker form than some might have hoped. So very strong support by citizens to not let the rule of law be part of flexibility in Europe. Likewise, in our party actors research, we have also complemented our qualitative research with a survey. So this draws on a survey we produced last fall, end of last year, and which 42 party actors answered from across the political spectrum. Unfortunately, we don't have their party affiliations because many of them would not say, but the data anyway is very instructive and very clear as to what party actors think. So this here shows you how much party actors thought that flexible integration should be permitted in all areas, in some areas, or in no areas. And as you can see, the large majority thinks that it shouldn't be permitted in all areas. It's only 7%. And from the table below, I'm not sure whether you can see the numbers, but it says that 60%, over 60% of those who thought it shouldn't be allowed in all areas, thought that rule of law should be exempted from flexibility. So that's very strong data there. And furthermore here, the first of these questions looks at whether party actors think that the rule of law is part of the EU's effectiveness, basically, and 90% thought this is the case. The second question then asked whether they agreed that a commitment to the rule of law was part of the EU's democratic legitimacy. And here you see that 95% agree. So the EU not taking the rule of law seriously, according to 95%, this means of party actors would undermine its democratic legitimacy. And finally, also very clear result on the last item here, over 90% agreed that it is the EU's role and its responsibility to take action against democratic backsliding countries. So concluding then, from these findings, it does seem important to take regional diverging perceptions of the eye into account, and to also pay attention to the cleavages that arrive between those on the right and those on the left, with the latter being more concerned about equality issues and solidarity that arises in regard to the eye. Because if it's being considered as a discriminatory instrument, then of course it will become problematic as regards its acceptance by citizens and party actors, and might actually prove more divisive than regular integration. And surely that wouldn't be beneficial for the eye. So much attention must be paid to when it's used and to its institutional design, to how it's being used, with party actors all the time mentioning that it's important that it's a transparent, clear process with clear criteria which are being stuck to. And finally, whilst there's generally quite a good level of support for the eye, the data that we've got really shows that both citizens and party actors don't think that the rule of law should be part of this flexibility. And I leave it there. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Yes, thank you very much, Sandra. Very much interesting new data also you presented here, specifically on party views on the eye, your own research, but putting it also in a broader context with public opinion and the eye, pointing at the limitations, potential limitations of the eye, and some very clear and bold conclusions at the very end. So allow us then to proceed with the next panelists. We would open the Q&A session after the three panelists, after we listen to their respective inputs. So let's continue with our next panelist, whom we have on our program. I'm very delighted to welcome Matteo Bonomi. Matteo is, well, from the as a research fellow at the Istituto Affari Internazionali in Rome. So we zoom from Cornwall to Rome now, where Matteo works on EU politics and institutions in the respective III program. His professional experience and research interests relate to European integration and enlargement policy. He is assistant project coordinator of one of the Horizon 2020 projects, EU IDEA, led actually by III, and he's also a member of the Balkans in Europe Policy Advisory Group. He has published academic and policy papers on various aspects of European integration, Western Balkans, EU relations, and the political economy of EU enlargement. Matteo, you would have 10 minutes now. I will put your statement now also in the chat while you will take up the floor. I'm very happy to have you with us here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. It's a very pleasure of mine to be here today with you. And today we are here to discuss what governments, but especially citizens, want with regard with the conference on the future of Europe. However, in my opinion, while it's of course extremely important to take into consideration citizen answers that are extremely relevant, I also believe that we should devote the same amount of attention to the questions that were posed to them with the conference. I think that what citizen wants pretty much depends on what institution also ask to citizens. So it depends on which question they were asked to answer. In modern democracy that are representative, so that work through representative institution without exception, the question frame the will of the people as much as the answer. And this is the case even in referendum, as the Brexit referendum reminded us. The way and the context in which the question was asked to British people really much was crucial for forming their will and also driving the outcome of this consultation, for good or bad. So, which is the question that today is posed to European citizens through the launching of the Conference of the Future of Europe, and what they are supposed to debate face to face and thanks to modern technologies as we are doing here today. Unfortunately, at least in my perception, this has remained a bit underspecified and far from completely clear. And this ambiguity on the question that it was posed to EU citizens is very much reflect the institutional confusion, if you want, that have characterized the European Union and the conflicting logics among different European institutions. We have the supranational logic of the Commission, the intergovernmental one of the Council, and the pan-European of the Parliament. So I'm coming to our first question of the panel. Can the Conference on the Future of Europe be a viable tool for reform? I think we all hope so. And the difficulties in launching this consultation, this endeavor, should only strengthen our belief that the EU needs reforms. And of course, the conference is the right setting to debate the future of Europe and its reform. However, this outcome is far from a given, and I think for the conference to be a success, it should fulfill at least two main conditions. First, we need much more clarity about what is asked to European citizens, so which is the question that is posed to them. And secondly, how their answer will be taken into consideration by institutional actors. Regarding my first point, I believe that we should make really clear that the subject of the conversation is EU institution and their governance. And even if we are considering specific policy, we should evaluate them in the light of effectiveness and legitimacy of the entire EU policy. And second, of course, we need the institutional actor that make this conversation relevant. So, and if the European Council in recent years have been too much divided internally to take position on this, I think really individual member states, a group of them, have the responsibility to take a citizen proposal seriously. And I think both elements really characterize the project I'm somehow representing here today, European EU idea, European integration and differentiation for effectiveness and accountability, that is led by my institute, EI. And I think really the added value of our projects is that we try really to shift this perspective from on the differentiation on its governmental and organizational perspective. We, of course, we take into consideration how the EU came to be differentiated, but really what we try to do is to look at dynamic of EU differentiated governance and what is their impact on first of all, on the effectiveness on this policy, and which are the mechanism for accountability and so for legitimacy. And so our point of departures is quite a wide definition of differentiation. Any modal that is provide the theoretical framework of our project that was provided by Sandra Kröger and her research team at Geneva University. And so integration as a different that defines differentiation as any modality of integration and comparison that allowed member and non-member state, but also sub-state entities to work together in a non-homogeneous and flexible way. However, this was applied by our research project in several fields. So the three main macro area of EU policy, really to try to assess their impact on the overall legitimacy and effectiveness of European action. And of course, it's our work is still quite a work in progress, but I think we can really contribute to this debate, especially since if the alternative seems to be more and more, as it seems today, between muddling through and have a more clustered European Union, I think really reflection and institutional mechanism to keep coherent the entire project are fundamental, starting from the rule of law, as Sandra was mentioning, but also more than that, probably. And I stop here and for the Q&A session.
Very good, Matteo. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your input here, addressing also one of the bold questions we outlined beforehand, specifically the question on whether or not the Conference on the Future of Europe represents a viable tool for reform. You positioned yourself very clearly here, and that gives me a very good opportunity now to move on to our third panelist, Magdalena Góra. She is Associate Professor of Political Science and European Studies at the Institute of European Studies of the Jagiellonian University. Her research deals with legitimacy and contestation in external relations of the European Union, on EU activeness in international relations, and specifically in EU's close neighborhood. She has worked and taught in a number of academic institutions, and she participated in several research projects currently. And this is one of the reasons, Magda, why you are also with us here today. You are a co-leader of a work package on the future of Europe debate within the Horizon 2020 funded project EU 3D, EU Differentiation, Dominance and Democracy. I see that you have already set up your PowerPoints. Also here, I would give you 10 minutes for your presentation. And in the meantime, I would also put your statement in the chat. And after your presentation, I will open then the floor to the full plenary to bring up your questions. You might use the chat function in order to indicate that you want to bring up a question, or you would like to outline your question here specifically already. But first, let's listen to Magda. Magda, the floor is yours. Happy to have you on board.
Thank you very much, Michael, for the introduction. Thank you very much, organizers, for having me. My presentation is trying to connect with the question of the conference, even though I will raise the differentiated integration part later on. It seems to me that in order to say something about the future dynamics of the conference, it is useful to revisit past debates on the future of Europe. And I have a privilege to present a preliminary research findings that a group of researchers across Europe, you can see all of them on the title slide. So it's only sort of my privilege to present it on behalf of this group of excellent scholars that contributed to this comparative research. We focus on national parliaments and the way they debate future of Europe. And these findings are one of the key research tasks within the EU3, the projects you can see here. We covered the debate on future of Europe since 2015 until now. The presented data here are until the end of 2019, but we keep going, sort of gathering the data and analyzing it. So this is very preliminary results. And our two major focuses in this research is that we want to know how national parliaments are really, and who within those. So this is really, as you'll see, kind of in relation to what Sandra was presenting, we are also very much interested in how particular party actors are sort of narrating this, but basically what are their sort of constitutional narratives about the future of Europe, and how they also see our key concepts such as differentiation, but also dominance, which is a key analytical concept that we employ in our research. Our analysis demonstrates that the political actors in various national arenas debate similar issues and problems regarding future of Europe. However, the local responses propose solutions for the reforms, particularly for the institutional setup of the EU and for the policies, vary significantly. In many member states, there is a little discussion, and I will start here, of this dynamics that I think is also going to be extremely important for the conference. Is the dynamics, is it about the policy or is it about the polity debate, really? In many member states, there is a little discussion of the overall institutional reform, sort of about the EU democracy. It is debated, as you can see on the chart here, but this is maybe 20% of the references that we coded that are about the institutional setup. The political actors rather focus on policies, and they see reforms embedded in policies. But those the policies that also very much filtered by national perspectives, problem, and interest, and the solutions provided within us. So you can see here on the first chart that there are the overall context that is also shared across our data set is the crisis, right? The Eurozone, migration, also COVID pandemic, as well as the external crisis that surrounds Europe, both in the southern and eastern neighborhood. The migration, as you can see, overall consumes, and it's mostly because we cover the period since 2015, right? So this is also the time overlap. But this is the most important policy context in which these discussions are sort of embedded. The second one is also Brexit, and in relation to Brexit, also the relations with neighbors, enlargement, neighborhood policy, but also EEA, since we have one of the associated countries in our data set. So this is also important. Then external relations, particularly defense and security. This is also because a lot of those debates are in reference to President Macron's proposals. So there is a natural tendency, and economic and monetary union. One methodological comment here. We have three different data sets. We have a Future of Europe data set, migration data set, and Eurozone reform data set. And the data that you see here, the results that you see here, are only about the future of Europe. So obviously, if we would, if I'll present you this sort of aggregated data from all of the three sets of debates that we analyze, because then probably it seems to me that economic and monetary union prominence would be much higher than it is in here. But it gives you the hint also what policy areas are important. What is, sorry, because it's, the second point is who speaks about the future of Europe. in those debates, selected debates. It seems to us that political denomination of political actors is very important when it comes to activities on the future of Europe. In this dark blue color, you have an aggregated data showing you by party families, showing you that this conservative and right-wing participants are quite active, even though it is across the spectrum that the actors are engaging. But what is not shown on the chart, but it's another set of variables that we're using, that the location of actors on a pro and anti-European scale also differentiates their involvement in debate, and Eurosceptic actors were active as regards future of Europe in analyzed debates, even when they were minor parties in parliament, sort of in terms of numbers. But also strong proponents of EU integration were also active. And this is something that I will raise in the conclusions, because this is something that is important for the for how citizens will be engaging within a conference on future of Europe. It seems to us that the fact that there is this interest of the sort of Eurosceptic actors, but also populist actors in this, can form a significant risk for the conference itself, that I will raise in the end. Differentiated, last but not least, differentiated integration is one of our issues that we look into the parliament. Here is only the very sort of descriptive analysis of how DI features in those debates on future of Europe that we selected, how relevant these discussions on the solutions. I will not repeat, because Sandra did the wonderful job introducing the entire problematic of differentiated integration. So what is interesting is that DI is not maybe a major and dominant theme, even though it's approximately 30% of statements in those debates refer this or another way into DI. In this data that I'll show you today, that I'm showing you today, we are not providing you this information, who is for and who is against. This is something that will be ready to present maybe soon, but not today. But what interested us for this particular presentation was basically who raises those issues. As you can see, this is basically across the party family spectrum here. So both from the left and from the right wing, we have actors that are sort of raising those issues, both framing them in a positive or negative, or as Sandra was providing as an opportunity or risk feature, right? What is interesting, and it was kind of interesting, and I was extremely interested in some of the data that Sandra presented earlier, is that in our data set, it was the DI was primarily prominent in those parliaments, specifically in Central and Eastern Europe, where it was perceived as a possible tool of further peripheralization of those countries in the EU, right? So, and in those parliaments, what we also observed is that both proponents and opponents of further integration were sort of careful about the DI instruments. We didn't really detect it that much, the southern dimension, but it's mostly because we only have a Greek parliament, so we do not have in our data set Spanish and Portuguese, which I think form this southern group that Sandra was referring with the economic element. So this is something to look further. To conclude and link those findings, preliminary findings, with the Conference on Future of Europe, it seems that the reform process concerning institutional setup of the EU polity was less debated. Instead, actors focus on policies requiring immediate and necessary reforms in their view within their national context. And it is expected that the Conference of Future of Europe will be driven by the similar dynamic. We already saw it in the pressure from some member states to push more attention to the policies rather than the polity. This is all about the treaty change and so on. But we've heard from prominent European politicians that this is not off the table, as for now at least. So it is interesting to see that this probably will be the driving dynamics for the conference. Secondly, the main pattern is neither fully coherent debate on the future of Europe among member states of the parliaments, nor the debate is fully segmented or separated into diverse and incompatible national realms. And as a result, the task to prevent Conference on Future of Europe to end up bringing out, differentiated, idiosyncratic national perceptions, confirming the fragility of legitimacy, will be really to propose a bold reform agenda and stream those diverse views into some clear goal ahead. And this leads me to my third view, which is in line with our recent policy brief that you can find on EU3D website, whether the conference is our opinions on the Conference of Future of Europe, is that the conference itself raises hopes and expectations among citizens, and those hopes must be satisfied with tangible results. Otherwise, this can push the sort of discourse into the hands of the populace, because the risk is that populist actors will use it as a vehicle to prove the EU impotence in delivering the results. And this is something to one of the warning that I think is ahead of us in seeing what would be the outcome of the conference. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much for allowing me to show this research, and I'm looking forward to future discussions. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Excellent, Magda. Thank you very much. And with this, we have actually had a chance to zoom into these three ongoing, very prolific Horizon 2020 projects on DI. And the nice thing with a TEPSA perspective on all of this, that we are part on all of these projects, and the overarching project, which is DICE, even here TEPSA is taking a leading role, the TEPSA Brussels office in particular, spearheaded by Mariam and her team. So I'm very glad that you were able to stick to the timing, so that we also do have a little bit of time for discussions and debates. And there are already the first comments and questions in the chat. And I would start, I do have a question outlined by Jaap de Zwaan, former Secretary General of TEPSA. Jaap, is it okay if I give you the floor, that you elaborate on your question? And then I think there was Roderick as well. Maybe Roderick, you could join in after this. Jaap, you would be first, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael and others. Well, I put on a piece of paper, of course, this is an interesting topic. I have always taken into account the future interests of the European Union itself. Of course, politicians are there to discuss, communicate with their citizens and convince them about proper policy matters. So if the future of European Union cooperation makes it more or less necessary that we at least consider these options of differentiated integration, then we should also take into account the EU interests themselves. And for my part, I always have made clear that as far as I'm concerned, of course, being a member of the European Union, you cannot practice differentiated integration in the areas of fundamental rights and fundamental values, so the Article 2 issues, because that's the basic of your membership. And equally, internal market cooperation cannot lend itself for differentiated cooperation. However, in other areas, and I dare to say also asylum and immigration, and as far as I'm concerned, also the CFSP area should lend itself, because otherwise we will be completely marginalized in the future. Because we are handing over more responsibilities to the European Union for good reasons, of course. So in order to be able to play a responsible role in future policies, we should indeed understand, and politicians should take the lead in this discussion, that in certain domains we have to practice differentiated integration without excluding any member state. So you could easily organize a project of differentiated integration, as we, by the way, are doing already now in the MU area, but you could do it probably also in other areas, allowing those who are not willing to participate in the first instance to join later. So I think we need a bit more flexibility in this in this area. But of course, I also signaled in my comment the reference to treaty change. My own idea is that we have to amend and simplify the requirements of enhanced cooperation. But that's, of course, not easy. And then, of course, this comes back to the acceptance by citizens, national parliaments. But my main point is we have to clearly hint to responsibility of politicians to take the lead in this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jaap. Thank you. Excellent. I would take on board Roderick's comment or question as well, if that's okay. And then I would open the floor to the panelists and to see who would like to address those points. Roderick Pacey is our Maltese member, for those who do not know him yet, but I'm sure all of you do. Roderick, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Michael. My comment was very straightforward. It's very heartening that the rule of law is being is given such a premium by our citizens, because it was, I can say from experience, one of the main reasons why we fought to join the European Union in the first place. Apart from the economic benefits, which of course politicians always speak about, this was the what I would call intangible but very important benefit, which linked to the values of the European Union, was very important. So it should be upheld, and I think it is very dangerous if any kind of flexibility is compromised on this point. I would like to take the occasion to make two quick points about the other presentations, if I may, because I did not have time to.
Of course, yes, that's the idea.
Well, one of them is, Bonomi's presentation struck me because I participated in 3 cross-border consultations that took place in about 2 years ago, before the pandemic. And I was amazed by the fact that as one of the participants, I never received any document afterwards outlining the details of what was passed forward to the Commission and the institutions as the outcome of our citizens' gathering. Now, I don't like to engage in other touristic conventions of this kind in the future. So I think it is very important to articulate what the citizens are saying and how it is being transmitted and sent forward to the Future of Europe conference.
And the follow-up, basically, yeah.
And the last point is the one which was raised by Magdalena. Yes, the differential integration does look, is suspect. This is the outcome of a study, of data, which for some Eastern European countries. But echoing something which was said by Jaap previously, I mean, if it remains open-ended, I think it should be a stimulus, in my opinion, to push forward the process. I think we have to somehow free ourselves from the problem that we have seen in European integration of having to move with the slowest caravan in the train. We have to move forward. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you very much. I see that, Sandra, you unmuted yourself already. At least that's what I see. So I guess you would like to give it a first response. The floor would be yours, Sandra.
Thanks, Michael. I actually just did that so I wouldn't speak talking being muted eventually. I can start that. That's all right. No, I mean, what I thought was interesting in Magdalena, your presentation, I mean, many things, obviously, but one thing that I thought was particularly interesting was that you showed how debates in parliaments really focused on policy areas rather than on polity. And it actually resonates well with my own research, where party actors often actually said that there wasn't a party policy on DI itself. So they're basically kind of reflecting on the idea of the I as we were speaking, rather than being able to go back to a party line or party manifesto. And I think that says something about, well, I guess eventually party politics and as well as the EU, because party actors as well as governments, I guess, are just so busy dealing with policies and daily business that comes up that they, for one reason or another, don't really take the time to discuss these institutional issues, polity issues more in depth, as might well be important or required. And maybe that is one of the reasons why we then end up with very complex and not always coherent institutional design, as well as, of course, having to integrate a range of different perspectives on polity design. So I thought that was very interesting. Jaap, on your comment, I saw that more as a comment than as a question to me. But I mean, you said we should focus on the EU's future interests. I find that hard because I wouldn't know what the future interests of the EU are. I find it difficult enough to see what the EU's present interests are, as well as, of course, coming to an agreement between the member states about them. So, and I think you have this kind of traditional tension, of course, between those who argue in favor of strengthening the EU as a global actor and having to do that so it can act responsibly on a global scale and all of that. And on the other hand, those who focus more on its democratic inputs and legitimacy. And I guess I would position myself in that latter group. And I think that giving too much weight to what might be the EU's interest or not, because we don't know for sure ever, can always backfire, not least by a way of populists and neo-skeptics of all sorts. So it's really important, in my view, to take everybody on board so much as that is possible at all. And I'm thinking here particularly national parliaments, of course. Yes, I mean, we do have the eye on Schengen in monetary union, obviously already, but I guess what the data, both of colleagues and my own data, shows us that often the way this works creates divisions, frustrations, disappointments of different types. And so it's important, whilst I do agree that the eye is an important mechanism for integration not to come to a halt, I think it's also similarly important to try and have on board even those who do stay behind, as it were, whether temporarily or for a long time or permanently, to still include them in the process that is acceptable to all. Because again, otherwise, if that's not the case, it will create counter movements and reactions, which I think will ultimately be even more damaging to the EU than would it not go forward with the eye of one kind or another. And I leave it with that for now.
Yes, very kind. Thank you very much. I would, before Matteo and Matteo, I give you the floor. I would like to bring in a third person because he is Darak. I think I don't know personally, but I see you quite active in the chat. So if you're okay, I would give you the floor very quickly to share your views, because you seem to responding to Jaap's and also Sandra's reflections. Would that be okay, Darak?
Yeah, no worries. I hope you can hear me.
Hi, yes.
No, I was just saying that, like, I agree with Roderick's comment there that we do need to push forward with union-wide action. I think when it comes to the question of like sovereignty, that like a union-wide approach increases the sphere of sovereignty that we have available to us, there's things that nation states can't do on their own, such as tackling the climate change issue, and we've seen how ineffective it's been tackling the migration issue. So but the question is, for me, like, how do we push forward with the union-wide agenda when states are reluctant to secede their sovereignty? And so, like, I see in the model of a citizens' assembly maybe something with follow-up mechanisms and a well thought out citizens' assembly as a potential solution. I don't know what the other panelists think. How else can we push for union-wide responses on these intractable or contentious issues? So that was my question.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I thought it would be nice just to get you on board as well, because you have been quite active. Should we then proceed? Matteo would be, or yeah, Matteo? Okay, and then Magda afterwards. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I mean, all excellent point. I mean, the follow-up of the conference, of course, is the key, as I tried to highlight, and flexibility and the comments on absolutely, and of course, it's a key how allow this flexibility to move within the treaty. I think I would add on that comment, just it's not only about the integration, but also about cooperation among the member states. And I think it will be more and more important in key policy area, and the efforts to put EU member state action to allow them to create coalition within the European Union through European institutions, I think is really the key. And it could also help manage some of the tension that were highlighted, for instance, with regards with foreign policy, where this trade-off between the global EU as a global actor with its capacity to act and the rule of law. I think in certain issues, I mean, I think these two things should not go on different roads, but they can really be put together. Things, for instance, at the Western Balkans, how much the EU action have been not effective, despite having had a much geopolitical turn. And the rule of law in this year has not going better in the Western Balkans, on the contrary. So if the union is really based upon certain amount of value, I think in certain circumstances, the member state should take the responsibility to defend this actor, even if in some circumstances the European action does not appear effective. And I would stop here. Thank you.
Okay, very well. Thank you. Magda, I would give you the floor now, please.
Thank you very much for this debate and the questions. I'll try to respond to some of the points raised. To Roderick first, about the peripheralization, the perceptions of the DI in particularly Central and Eastern Europe in our dataset. But I think this, as Sandra showed, can also go into the South for different reasons. I think what we need to understand is that these solutions are always framed by political actors in a context of what they bring to the table with their past experience. And in Central and Eastern Europe, this is just immediately, recalling the moment of enlargement, of being outside, and sort of this is what was kind of interesting to find out is that even in countries like Slovakia, as you know, being a member of Eurozone, this resonates almost on the same notes as in countries that are not. So this is not about participating in an exercise that is open-ended or not. Here, the concept that we use, analytical concept of dominance, of sort of subjective perception of what this DI really is key to understand why they build those perceptions the way. And this is something that is beyond a pragmatic understanding of whether this can be an open-ended, exercise that we can join sooner or later. This is immediately seen in a power politics terms as being somehow pushed outside, regardless of whether that is or not the aim of the exercise. And I think we need to remember this, because this is interesting, and this is also visible in this research that Sandra presented on citizens' perceptions. This is also why it links with the economic crisis, that in countries in which citizens felt dominated, if you wish, using our analytical categories, are having much more skeptical positions to it. And I think this is something that leads me to excellent Sandra points about the about this sort of attempt to escape from of political actors, party representatives in your case, parliamentarians in our case, from discussions about the polity reform or DI itself, is because it is to a certain extent, it is of an abstract nature to them, right? They speak a different language to their constituencies. This language is a language of politics. It's a language of, output legitimacy, delivering, and so on. And this is sort of, it seems to me, therefore, these polity reforms are very often hidden within the policies. My point was maybe not to make that it's either policy reform or polity reform. My point rather was that they are sort of perceiving the desired reforms through policies, through efficiency, through delivering results, and therefore asking the sometimes abstract questions can be counterproductive, if you wish. I don't know if that makes sense. And on top of this, going to Jaap's excellent comments, I think we had a policy meeting with Chairman Weber this week, and I think one of the interesting points about the different proposals is that there is a significant role of citizens having quite clear roles when it comes to future global dynamics. And I think this is something that is important to see also possibly in through the prism of DI. Is there any possibility to have the sort of closer integration within a foreign defense security, even if not for all 27 member states? This is something that I think is gonna be one of the issues debated by citizens, because this is the area where citizens are having quite clear views, right? They want to be together because they want to be strong, because otherwise this is bad, right? There is no sort of other option in this particular system in which we are living now. So I think this is also interesting, that this sort of this can push for some solutions, right? Obviously, those who would be left outside will definitely contest that. And on the very last point about the citizens' assemblies, this is all interesting, and I think this Conference on Future of Europe exercise is really a starting point for something very interesting, maybe for the, the nucleus, for the transnational public sphere pushing this. But we also need to remember that the EU is primarily based on representative democracy. And if we think about the reforms of the democratic operation, we can obviously discuss all of the wonderful benefits of direct and participatory democracy. But we also need to keep in mind that one of the main points will be really to strengthen the representative aspect and deal with the problems that are unsolved for years, right? Like, I don't know, transnational list or whatever else. And maybe this is something that we should keep in mind, that this is not gonna be a ideal solution, the conference. It can strengthen engagement, it can give citizens voice under the condition that there is a viable follow-up, as Matteo was stating, right? If this conference will be only exercise of discussion, we will come back to Roderick's comment. Why am I doing this as a citizen? If there is no follow-up, if no one's coming back to me and tell me I got engaged, I paid my I gave you my energy, give me something back. And I think this is important in this exercise, that this needs to go back to citizens this way or another. And the three institutions need to take that really to the heart. Thanks.
Okay. While I'm reaching out to others to identify themselves in case they would like to join into the discussion. I just wanted to also inform you that Sandra and Magda, they also put some links in the chat, important links to follow ongoing activities. So in case you haven't spotted that yet, you can easily follow their ongoing work and the network activities respectively. For the time being, I do not see any other questions in the chat, but I don't really see this as a major problem, more an indication that there was so much information that we have to start digesting now, and that this conference will give all of us an opportunity to, on the one hand, now know whom to address, who to contact directly in case of doubt, in case of questions, the issues around public opinion, party political views on DI, the ongoing research and data provided also by Magda, or the broader reflections Matteo presented on the viability of the conference on the future of Europe as a tool for policy and or polity reform. You have now basically met the leading actors in the ongoing Horizon 2020 projects on differentiated integration. So that might be a continuation, or for some of you, a starting point to get involved also in their respective activities. All three projects have regular conferences that are open to the public. And as I said, there is this overarching DICE project, which brings all those three projects together, and specifically focusing here on dissemination, in which then the TEPSA Brussels office actually takes also an important role. And with this, I would suggest to leave it where it is. I still see that Darak has a short comment. Maybe Darak, you want to give it and address it right away?
Maybe, no, just a little comment there. When I hear about that, yes, we are a representative democracy, but I think that rings shallow for a lot of people. You know, we're all aware how easily, you know, people can be manipulated, and so I do think we need to start looking into other avenues of what democracy could mean. You know, I'm not convinced either that a citizens' assembly is the way for the Conference of the Future of Europe to go ahead with, but you know, I am still looking for other ideas.
I'm sure that every one of you wants to respond to this. Sandra raised her arm first, her hand. So Sandra, you are first, and then Matteo, Magda, if you have final points, I would give you the floor, and that with this we would conclude this panel. Sandra, your last words, please.
Yes, thanks. And actually, it so happens to also interact with what Darrett just said, but mostly I wanted to react to what Magdalena had said before. But they are linked, so that works fine. No, I mean, obviously many now see this conference, the ongoing conference, as this kind of potential exercise to create the European public sphere, etc. But let's not forget that similar expectations existed in regard to the potential convention for the EU back in 2002 and 2003. So it's not like we haven't been there. I also don't want to say that I wouldn't like for there to be a European public sphere or more of it. That's not at all my point. But perhaps that there are structural limits to just how much of that is possible to create. That's one point. So I do think it's actually important, the point about representative democracy, and you know, public spheres continue to be anchored in domestic publics and audiences, and they interact much more than people with a European audience and public, and it's important to not lose sight of that. And of course, also, as much as it's good that the EU now gives citizens an opportunity to come in, it has also that there are ample examples of the Commission using select interventions of either citizens or interest groups to justify proposals that it wants to go forward with anyway, or to reject others. There's lots of literature and evidence on this. So to use these processes very selectively. And I'm not sure that actually increases the democratic legitimacy of the EU at all. I would say the contrary is the case. So I just actually wanted to, as Magdalena has done before, plead in favor of a stronger connect between the EU level and domestic parliaments, really. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, and Roderick just joins in by saying representative democracy must not mean excluding the citizens whose participation is a truly Republican value. I think that adds up very nicely. I would like to give you, Matteo, now a maximum minute of wrapping things up. Thank you.
How to conclude on this huge issue as a representative democracy? For sure, I mean, democracy, the perception is that representative democracy is a bit in crisis, and often this alternative tool somehow help to, at least in Italy, traditionally, we start to reflect to alternative tools for democracy when as a symptom of crisis of representative democracy. So far is the only democracy I know, but let's see. And of course, participation, it does not mean to affect participation, that is fundamental, but I think it's part of it and it should be structured by institution. My point was just about the importance of the institution and the importance to make European institution representative for what they are supposed to do. That was it.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you very much. Magda, please.
I made my point before, so, and I agree with my co-panelists on those things. What I add is the things that are, I think, extremely important in this exercise of Conference on Future of Europe. First is technology, and I think this was also mentioned by Commissioner in the opening remarks, is that this is something really new, that this is multilingual, that this shortens the citizens' distance between where they are and the sort of, top echelons of power in Brussels, right? This is something important. And the second important point that I think is really crucial, despite the visible conflict that all of we know, is that this is the exercise that is run by 3 EU institutions. And there is a little bit of a difference between what Sandra was mentioning, the Convention on Future of Europe. This time, these are the institutions, and I think of the EU. And I think this gives them also the sort of kind of ownership of this process, which is very good. And let's see how they will manage the differences in terms of what is the agendas for the conference that are provided by Parliament, by Commission, and by the Council and Member States. And I think this is super interesting. And let's hope they will deal with those differences and we will come up with some common, very bright, future vision. Thanks.
Yes, and let's hope that citizens will make use of this technical platform, that us in the TEPSA network, us universities and think tanks encourage people, young people, all people, taking into consideration the regional aspect, which was put forward today by many of you as well, to encourage people to really make use of this platform in order to actually not only have it, but to make use of it. Thank you all very much. And with this, in time, I hand over to the organizers, and I wish all of you a very good and successful continuation of the TEPSA PPC Pre-Presidency Conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you to all the panelists. I think this was a wonderful plenary and it raised a lot of questions. It also provided some of the answers. So thank you again for taking your time and participate in this. I would also like to draw your attention to the next 2 parallel sessions at 11 o'clock. We start with parallel session 1, which will be on this same link, and it will address the Western Balkans and the Eastern neighborhood. And then on the second link, which was provided to you, there will be a parallel session 2 on European strategic autonomy. So I hope to welcome you there as well.